Here's Richard Zussman in conversation with Adrian Dix.
Polls have not moved in nearly a year. A year ago, you were up big, you're up big now, and if they stay that way in a year from now, you'll be sitting in a different office, you'll be the Premier. Is your success more of an indication of the failures of the Liberals over 11 years, or the prospects that your premiership brings?
Well, I think it's two things. I mean, really, if you look since the last election, the only significant thing the Liberal government has done has been the HST, which was damage the economy coming in, damage the economy going out. They're really, in their principal economic initiative, has disrupted and hurt the economy. So, of course, there's a negative view on what the Liberal Party has done in office. There's no question about that. And even the Liberal Party doesn't plan to campaign on its record. They're going to attack the NDP. That's what they've promised to do. That's what they're going to do. On our side, though, I think over the last year we showed a different approach. I mean, we've been tough on the issues, but I think respectful of everybody. I'm respectful of Premier Clark, of Mr. Cummins, of Ms. Sturck. I think that's what people want to see more of, and so we're putting forward, I think, a more positive, open, generous approach than opposition parties usually do. Usually they're running solely against the government. That's what we've tried to do, and I think people have responded positively to it. I think people like the way our approach to things. But, you know, it's up to the voters, and it's not the polls that will decide things. The election will decide things, and that I think people want change in BC. I think they want think the Liberals should spend some time in opposition, generally, but they still have to decide to vote for the NDP, and I'm going to work hard to see that that happens.
Critics have attacked you for laying low on issues. Is that what you're doing, laying low?
Not at all. In fact, if you compare what I've done and what the NDP's done in terms of laying out what we're going to do in our platform, 18 months ago we talked about the tax issue, which opposition parties almost never do. I think we've been straightforward. We've laid out more of what we're going to do than the Liberals did, for example, in 1996 and 2001, at this point in the cycle. So if you look at the facts, we've been more open, more serious, more grounded on the issues than any other opposition party ever has been. And so, you know, I understand that the Liberal Party wants to attack the NDP, that's what they do. That in January of this year, 15 months before the election, or 17 months before the election, they ran one of the biggest attack ad campaigns in BC history against me. And it was a personal, kind of nasty attack ad campaign. In the by-election campaigns, well, we ran a positive campaign around our candidates, Joe Tressolini and Gwen O'Mahony. The Liberals, again, ran some of the most vicious personal attack ads the province has ever seen. And I'm encouraged by the fact that people responded positively to our, more generous campaign, and they responded negatively to the Liberals' negative campaign. But that's the reality.
Let me read you some statements that we've heard from Premier Clark attacking you directly on the economy. She said, "You can't tax and spend to prosperity, and low taxes are the most important thing to make life affordable." Are these attacks from the Premier warranted?
Well, this is a government that in the last election said, just days before the election, that there was a $495 million deficit. It turns out to be 5 times that. They said they weren't going to bring in the HST, and then they brought in the HST, repudiated by the public. They've raised medical services premiums. They just did it this year. They did it last year. They did it the year before that, well above the rate of inflation. They've almost doubled them in their time in office. So, you know, I think people understand on the substance that the government doesn't have a lot of credibility on these issues. I think you have to have a more serious approach. So they're going to present a budget in the spring where they sell off assets in 1 year and pretend they have a balanced budget. We need a more serious approach. So what I've said is, you got to decide on a few key priorities for the economy and for the province. Talked about skills training, and I've said I think it's very important in a time where young people need more post-secondary education to ensure that they have access to that. It's not fair to stop people from the very education that they need to get the jobs of the future, to stop them for it because they don't have enough money in the short run. So I've laid out what our key priorities are. And I think that view contrasts with a government that's lost touch with people. I mean, the Premier right now, in a budget year where they announce reductions in post-secondary education and skills training, is spending public dollars to go on television to promote her own position on that issue. So wouldn't it make more sense to have a government that actually created positions in apprenticeship programs rather than one that spends money advertising about it. I mean, that's the contrast.
We know a little bit what you have planned with taxes. We know you're planning on increasing the corporate tax rate from 11 to 12% if elected, that people who make more than $150,000 a year will pay higher taxes. We haven't heard a lot about what your changes will be for the carbon tax, whether you plan on increasing it while keeping it revenue neutral, or whether you're going to take out that revenue neutrality part of it.
Said that we're going to address the question of revenue neutrality of the carbon tax. In other words, right now, no carbon tax money goes, for example, to transit. All of it went to lower taxes, principally for big business, and for the people who got the biggest benefit were high-income people. And we said that that doesn't make sense, that if people are going to pay a carbon tax in Langley, for example, but they get no services connected to that, that's a problem, especially since there isn't adequate transit services for many of them to get to work. Right? So what we're trying to do is connect the taxes people pay with the services they get. So specifically, we've said we're going to reinstate the tax on the big banks that the government took off in 2008 in order to pay for, to ensure that young people have access to skills. We've said that we're going to reinstate or return corporate big business tax levels to 2008 levels. That means big business keeps the tax cut they got between 2001 and 2008, but we're going to return them to 2008 levels. So we have the resources to pay for things. And that's, for example, key services that the province needs, including big business, right? So it's important that goods and services move around Metro Vancouver, that we have basic infrastructure services around the province. And so it's interesting, though. I announced that, not yesterday, not the day before yesterday, not in an election campaign, but 18 months ago, I announced that. And when I announced that decision, the Liberals went, you know, kind of crazy. They attacked me vociferously. They called it, I think, 18th century socialism, right? Since then, they've decided to increase corporate taxes. And they've announced that in the last budget for the 2013-14 tax year. So, you know, the good news for me is that on the substance, people are agreeing with me.
The CEO of Enbridge has said on the record that the door still won't be closed to the Enbridge pipeline if you are elected premier. Why would he make a comment like that? Have you given any indication that that's the case?
Well, look, my position on Enbridge Northern Gateway is pretty clear. I mean, you can go to bcndp.ca and see a detailed letter we've put out on that question. We've said what we're going to do if we're elected, which is to end the equivalency agreement. So people know what our position is.
You have had some fundraisers with big resource companies, not typically people who attend NDP fundraisers.
Yes.
Are you moving away from your roots? And if you're going to take their money, do you then need to help out those in the resource sector and potentially ignore those who have supported you and your leadership and your party for a long, long time?
Look, I've had this year 230 separate meetings with business community leaders, with businesses in BC. And this is where I differ from the Liberals, right? They only talk to their friends. And I talk to everybody. I listen to everybody. I don't think we always have to agree, but I think it's important that we have an understanding. I think the resource sector is crucially important to the BC economy. And I'm going to, as Premier, promote that sector, you know, in consistent with our values and with our laws in BC. So I want to have high environmental standards, but get to decisions more quickly. So I'm happy to meet with the resource community all the time. The week the Liberals attacked me for having a relationship with the BC Federation of Labour, I had long meetings on platform questions with the Council of Forest Industries, with the Mining Association of BC. I think what people expect in BC is that we talk to everyone, we meet with everyone, we engage with everyone. And so that's really important. I went to Toronto and met with presidents of the chartered banks for the same reason, because I want people to understand across Canada that investment is important to BC. So, you know, I think it's a balance, and I think one of the issues sometimes between the NDP and the business community is that is a lack of understanding. So I want to ensure through meetings and through communications that we understand each other. It doesn't mean we're always going to agree, and that's democracy. That's the society we live in. But I think it's important that we understand each other.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Anytime.